Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
This may sound a little sacrilegious, but there almost seems that there's a level of complacency, even boredom, dare I say it, now as we've passed this decade mile marker of a solidly good economy. Welcome again to the most widely watched and the longest running source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I am Chris William, and maybe we're just distracted as we head into the slower summer months here in the Carolinas. On this edition, though, issues that are still outstanding and being debated, like education, trade, local issues like housing, still seem to be knocked around. We will discuss some of this later on, and we welcome the president of the North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities, Dr. Hope Williams. Stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. BARINGS, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Dan Gliatta of Cargo, John D. Chaffee from NCEast Alliance, and special guest, Dr. Hope Williams, President, North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities.
I'm tired of them winning everything.
Hello, welcome to our program. You know, always the good stuff happens right before the cameras roll. But gentlemen, thank you for being on the program. John, Dan, good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.
John, you know, so obviously your area of dominant influence is what's called the Northeast Alliance in North Carolina. That is what a lot of North Carolinians at least call Down East. Down East has had some challenges around economic growth. Not to say it hasn't happened, but it hasn't happened in places like Charleston and Greenville, South Carolina, and Charlotte and RTP as quickly. Does this idea that's gone back and forth around trade and the trade between the U.S. and China as we kind of bang through that, is that a tender subject down east when it comes to trade and exports? It
is a bit, because you find companies that sit on both sides of that issue.
Like Smithfield Foods?
Smithfield Foods, or if you're in the steel industry, Nucor Steel, you know, is certainly benefiting from that in terms of their steel production facility in Winton, North Carolina, in the far northeast. But if you're an assembly plant that's making, whether it be lift trucks or beverage trucks or somewhere in terms of the steel fabrication business, you're feeling a little bit of a pinch because your prices have gone up, and it's a challenge in terms of being able to still maintain your prices as you're facing an increased cost in terms of raw material.
Yeah. So Dan, jump in here. Upstate South Carolina, Greenville, Spartanburg, Greer, Anderson, all of these places are jumping. No doubt about it, right?
Yep.
Good problems to have. In reflection of any kind of trade issue, does that show up with your clients or the people that you talk to?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, you know, margins are already a little bit thin. So for whether it's currency exchange, whether it's trades and tariffs, we're in the marketing business. So the first thing that gets cut is marketing budgets, and the last thing they start spending again is marketing. So that idea, the ripple effect of the product and the raw materials potentially costing more, has an effect throughout the company and affects a lot of the businesses that service big corporations.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, you're right.
Do you see small businesses being particularly at risk to that?
Depends. I mean, small businesses going in with the mindset that macro influences be damned. I'm going to succeed because I control my own destiny. But as the confidence kind of erodes from the economy, since they're the drivers of the economy, you start to see a little bit of confidence waning, which means they stop spending, they stop hiring, they stop buying, which again affects small communities, but also affects kind of the U.S. as a whole. Do
you see that reticence about making investment or capital expenditures?
We've seen a little bit of that. Affected some companies from overseas that we're having conversations with, and it's such a confusing and complex issue that you find a company that's been sourcing a particular component overseas, and it may or may not be hit by a tariff. Or particularly they may be sourcing it, assembling it, and then shipping in the finished products, and the finished product's not subject to a tariff.
Right.
So we have seen a little bit of that in terms of some companies just saying, well, we want to hold back. But in other cases, we've announced 4 projects in the last 24 months in terms of new companies coming into Eastern North Carolina. So even that in and of itself is kind of a mixed bag in terms of what we're experiencing.
So do you think the trade TIF, I know it's called a bunch of different names, but you think that'll be a mortal wound for some of these businesses that are running thin margins, as Dan, you talked about?
Yeah, well, we're a little bit concerned of that with the rate going up to 25%. But to date, in terms of we haven't seen that take place, and hopefully in terms of it'll be a relatively short duration. And if it's a short duration, I suspect they'll be able to survive without too much of a negative impact.
Dan, you said something interesting. Here we are 10 years now into an expansion. We all remember 08, 09, and here we are 10 years past it. And people almost take it for granted, these are my words, almost take it for granted that this economy is going to continue to expand. But you talked about the confidence of small business waning. Do you see it waning?
Well, yeah, because everything you read is we've been in such a good spot. A recession is inevitable.
So are we going to talk ourselves into it, you think?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of just the volatility of just the noise that's out there. I mean, I haven't checked Twitter this morning, so I don't know where the tariff situation is right now.
But it's an interesting contrast because you look in terms of the job numbers for the past month, and they were at a near a record level. Yeah. So people hear about that, they see that, and then that's a positive, kind of like a little jolt of caffeine. Yeah. And then you come back in terms of the tariff issue being ramped up a little bit, and that seems to dampen things a little bit in terms of enthusiasm or a little bit of concern. So we're just all over the place.
State House in South Carolina had a short session this year. Do you keep up with any of the legislation that might impact the small business community?
A little bit. I mean, the biggest pain has been the tax situation. I mean, the law wasn't even written when we still had to do our, taxes on an individual. We're an LLC kind of a deal. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. In terms of the individual stuff on the state side of things, there's been a lot of stuff that encourages hiring and encourages growth on small business, which has been good for us.
So you feel good about that?
Yeah, we honestly focus on what's relevant to us. I hate to say it, but you're so consumed with servicing the clients, keeping your team happy, keeping food on the table kind of things, that we're not reading the state paper on a daily basis to see what Congress is doing.
So almost don't pay attention to it. You keep focused on what's directly in front of
and we
you.
pay attention what truly would affect us. So it's a little bit of a narrow view, but I mean that's kind of how you have to do it when you run your own business.
John, you said you were talking a little bit about some of the companies that announced presence or expansion in Eastern North Carolina. CSX, certainly in Edgecombe County, has not been a small one. After starting and stop again on that one, it seems like they are going to be in Edgecombe County.
Finally moving forward. Fantastic news.
How big of a deal is that?
It's big in terms of, particularly when you look at it in context of other infrastructure projects that are taking place in Eastern North Carolina that will actually increase our capacity. CSX is not a response to that. But if you look at terms of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline project coming in, that will increase the amount of available natural gas in Eastern North Carolina, which has been a chronic issue that's hampered growth and development, particularly as you move further eastern North Carolina. But the other element, designation of Interstate 87 from Raleigh to Norfolk, that's a huge step forward, just in terms of the branding to say, we can start putting at least the future I-87 shield on that. And then the CSX hub in Rocky Mount is also a big place. So you start adding these things up in terms of the cumulative effect. They have really paint a better or more brighter future for Eastern North Carolina as we move forward. And so that's all positive. And that'll generate activity. So I know, having talked with my friend Norris Tolson in Rocky Mount, runs the Carolinas Gateway Partnership, he mentioned when they first announced it, all of a sudden their client activity accelerated, and they were all of a sudden besieged by a number of different projects. When that went quiet, that interest dampened. And now that they're back up and they've had the groundbreaking, then he's saying the expectation is that'll start ramping up again and people will start coming back. But it'll help our existing manufacturers in the region as well by improving the efficiency of their logistics and their transfer of goods in terms of by rail, by truck. So we think there will be a lot of positives that will come out of that combination.
In about 20 seconds, do you feel like this, as you just described it, John, that you could see the announcement and then you can draw a line to results? Will these be meaningful results 12 months, 24 months from now to say,
so.
See, it really has made a difference?
We think so. And a lot of that's tied to logistics in terms of transportation, warehousing, as well as manufacturing. So I guess our expectation would see we may see some other core manufacturing sectors that may respond to that, as well as that distribution component. And that distribution could be companies that are importing through the Port of Norfolk or the Port of Wilmington and delivering that product to a distribution center somewhere near Rocky Mount, because they now have that flexibility to move goods over rail or road.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our guest's coming on in just a second.
Yeah.
You know, one of the great things about a hot economy, a good economy, expanding economy are the rural areas certainly have one challenge, but urban areas, first world problems to have, but urban areas also have a problem around housing, and that's affordable housing. What happens when middle income families can't afford to even rent in urban cores? Coming up on this program, we will talk about affordable housing in just a few weeks. On that program, the mayors of Charlotte and Columbia, Mayor Vi Lyles from Charlotte will join us. Mayor Steve Benjamin from Columbia will join us. Also, Bricka Eklund from the Self-Help Credit Union in Durham, as well as Michael Marsicano, the CEO of the Foundation for the Carolinas, will be on that program talking about affordable housing. While there is a structural difference between public and private colleges and universities, the end product and the hope for student achievement is pretty much the same. So what do private schools do that's different from their public counterparts? And how does the public debate around education policy, tuition, curriculum, sports, student outcome, how does all of that play during these General Assembly sessions where education figures very high on the agenda? Joining us now is the president of the North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities, Dr. Hope Williams. Dr. Williams, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let's start with the idea that, and President Williams, this is my assessment, and please feel free to correct me. It won't be the first time. Peter Hans from the North Carolina Community College System sat in your chair, as well as Dr. Tim Hardy from the South Carolina Technical College System, and they both said, or both inferred, that what they're managing is kind of a collection of schools and not so much a group of the same kind of schools. And when I look at private universities in North and South Carolina, I think the same thing. They're all schools, but they're all dramatically different in some ways, in politics and funding and student body, et cetera, et cetera. How do you manage that group?
Well, it's fascinating, and I have to say it's a wonderful opportunity to work with 36 independent college and university presidents. They comprise our board. And you're right, the colleges are different. I mean, they are all private, nonprofit. They have their own governing boards, but they are all committed to the same thing, and that is educating students for our growing economy in North Carolina and around the world, because our students go from North Carolina to other states all around the world. And so that's a real challenge, but at the same time, what we offer, I think, is a tremendous array of opportunities and choices for our students, because we really have to focus on what the students' need may be. Some students are much more comfortable in a small campus setting. We have 12, 1/3 of our independent colleges and universities with 1,000 or fewer students. Others are much more comfortable in a larger setting. Some are more focused on undergraduate-only opportunities. Others want to be part of a larger research institution with lots of graduate opportunities as well. So we have in North Carolina, both among our public and private institutions, both our 2-year and 4-year public ones, as well as our 1-2-year college, Lewisburg College, and our other 4-year private colleges, universities, tremendous opportunities for North Carolina students. And I think that's why historically, we have had a very low out-migration rate for students going to other states.
When you, as you talked about it, Dr. Williams, you have Barton College, Lees-McRae, Duke University, Wake Forest. I mean, the gulf between how you describe those colleges, you could drive a couple trucks through. So I guess, not to be too flippant, but how do you get all of those schools on the same page with the same priorities? Or do they have the same priorities?
They have the same overall priorities, which is to have the opportunity to provide the kinds of education that our students need to be successful in their futures. But they also obviously are very different in some ways, some much more research focused, but all are committed to the same goal. And so from that point of view, it really is not very difficult. Yeah. And I have to say, they come together, and people ask me sometimes, how is it that with such different institutions, we are able to be united on so many different issues? But that's because at the core, they're all very similar.
Mm-hmm. John, question?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, Hope.
Hi.
So if looking in terms of, we have a number of relatively small private colleges in eastern North Carolina.
Right.
Chris just mentioned a number of those. And we have an understanding of a regional STEM education initiative that begins in middle schools and moves on up with the connectivity community colleges and the universities. What do you see in terms of as emerging with the private colleges in terms of their effort to ramp up STEM education and meeting the needs in terms of a growing technology sector, or companies that are deploying various means of technology to be able to improve the quality of their businesses?
STEM has been a major focus for our independent colleges and universities, and we are growing in the areas of sciences. In fact, health sciences area has been one that has had the most growth over the past number of years, and you may be surprised to know that our independent colleges and universities in North Carolina award 92% of our physician assistants degrees in the state. 55% of our masters in nursing. We have a huge focus there, and there is demand. One of the things that's great about our colleges and universities is that they are agile, and when there's a demand in the market or from students, they can meet that fairly quickly. If they decide that the feasibility is there, that it could be a successful program and it would meet certain needs and they can get the funding, then they can, and accreditation of course, but they can get that moving pretty quickly. So I think that whether it's our new engineering schools, for a long time we had one engineering school among our institutions, we have several new ones now. I think the focus is on meeting the needs of our students and also the employers in the state.
Dan?
Yeah, we're in the creative business, and talent, to be candid with you, recruitment and retention and just getting talent to Greenville, South Carolina has always been a challenge. And the speed of business, the speed of technology, the speed of innovation, how quickly it's turning over, kind of a deal. It's always hard to just stay ahead, kind of a deal. You think of academia, and again, I'm not lumping it all together, but kind of an institution side of things. How, from an academic side of things, do you guys stay current and relevant without being frenetic? Because things are changing so fast and so rapidly, kind of thing.
I think that's absolutely true, and it does concern me sometimes when I hear people say that higher education doesn't change, because it is constantly changing.
Yep.
And it does have to be done in a way that is not a frenetic pace. It has to be methodical and incremental, and although in some cases it has to take a giant leap depending on what's happening.
Yep.
But that's where our tremendous faculty come into play, because they have to be able to be the ones at the forefront, state of the art. Our students come in expecting absolutely state of the art. And that's difficult even for for-profit companies to be able to do in terms of funding and keeping all that straight. But our colleges are amazing in figuring out how to do that and making sure that what they are providing for students is exactly what they're going to find in the workplace.
Cost of college, of course, has been rapidly increasing more than the cost of living. Dr. Williams, do you get the sense that the schools, at the larger schools like Duke, the small schools maybe like Barton, are they sensitive to the cost and to the brand that it's almost becoming, and this is my term, but I think you'll understand, it's almost becoming an elite club to go to a school now at the cost and some of the brands of these schools. So how do you control these costs, drop these costs that are clearly not sustainable long term, and still don't leave the middle income, the lower middle income behind?
I think one of the things that we would hope that parents and students would do is not to be discouraged by looking at the price, which is the sticker price of tuition and fees. Because there is a lot of financial aid available. There are scholarships, both merit and need-based. We have 50% of our North Carolina students who are Pell eligible students, which means they are the lowest income students. So we work very hard to find a way to put a financial aid package together that can meet their needs and can make it affordable for them. And if we were unable to do that, then we would not have nearly that high a percentage of students. Our middle class students, those who may not quite qualify for Pell but still need help getting there, there certainly is aid available for them as well. And so we work very hard to do that. Our colleges and universities themselves put in $600 to $700 million a year in institutional aid to work to provide those scholarships and grants for those students.
You know, and I'm not going to, I promise, I'm not going to beat you up about this the whole program. But I do want to come back to, as you described it, there are a lot of levers for people to find grants, loans, financial aid, and that's a very broad discussion. Wouldn't it make sense for these schools to say, you know, we're not going to grow our huge endowments. We're not going to post a retail price, but you don't pay that retail price. Couldn't schools come together, flatten the financial side of that, and just figure out, well, here's the true cost to come, and we'll make it simple for everyone? How could that be simplified?
Well, I know that sounds like that would be a simple solution. So I understand that, and there are a lot of people who wonder that same thing. And there are some colleges that have tried to do that, to try to say, okay, let's cut this out and bring this down. But you're going to find this hard to believe, I'm sure. But actually, the cost that you see, which may seem very high to you, is not even the total cost of education, because the colleges are funding that from endowment and gifts and things that they already have. So it would be even more difficult to make that less expensive. One of the things that makes it a challenge for our colleges and universities is that in North Carolina, we have a tremendous support system through the North Carolina General Assembly and a constitutional mandate for as free as practicable for our UNC institutions. So when we get questions about it, why our expenses, our costs are so much higher, we said, well, you do understand that there's a significant funding stream from the General Assembly at the front end, right, that allows tuition to be low. So that's part of the challenge, but I think that when people come to our colleges, when they talk to our financial aid officers, they all understand that the most important factor in success of a student is finding the right fit. So what we need to do is make sure that that's the right college for that student. That's why it's so important to have a wide array of options, whether it's geographic or student body size or offerings at the institution, to make sure that that's right for the student, and then try to figure out how to help that student be able to afford it.
Follow-on question to that, if I may, Chris,
2 minutes. Yeah, please.
So Mount Olive College recently announced an agreement with a community college, may have been Johnston Community College, for the equivalent in terms of a co-enrollment agreement. So they could start at Johnston Community College, be co-enrolled at Mount Olive, and when they finish that 2-year period, they cross over and they're a junior potentially at Mount Olive College. Do you see that kind of agreement emerging with more of the private colleges across North Carolina?
Right. We have about 5 major articulation projects underway with our North Carolina Community College system, and University of Mount Olive is very involved in those, all of those, because we know that that's what's going to take for us to be able to get to what is now a new state goal from My Future NC. That's being adopted across the state. Our board has done that, State Board of Education, the North Carolina Governor's Education Cabinet, on which I also sit, to make sure that we're providing enough adults with a post-secondary credential or degree. By 2030, we need to have about 2 million more adults with some type of high-quality post-secondary degree or credential. So these articulation agreements are critical to helping us get there. We have a lot of adults, and we have a number of adult programs. A lot of people think of us as traditional age students, and we certainly have a lot of those and are thrilled to have them. But more and more, and for long history, we have provided programs for those. Think of all those adults you know who have some college, and at some point, whatever happened, had to drop out. And now maybe they have a home and family and a job, and they're thinking about advancement, or maybe want to go into a different field. they're coming back to night, evening, weekend, online, in person, off-campus, on-campus types of offerings that we have for adults to help us be able to meet those needs of our employers and help our adults reach that, that goal that we have for the state.
We've got 30 seconds. I'm going to have to cut you off there, Dan, but thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Just in about 10 seconds, does Jeff Perez in South Carolina have the same challenge you do?
Well, he has the same challenge and opportunity, absolutely.
Better said.
20 institutions, outstanding folks in
Yeah.
South Carolina. We work together very closely.
Dr. Williams, thanks for being on the program. You're a great acolyte for this, and good to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend. I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, BARINGS, Grant Thornton, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.